Alright, Caleb, I got one. Let's do this. Ahoy hoy, this is Michaela from Team Retro, where we like retro games and we like the devices that bring them to us. And in this video, we are looking at the Pimax Portal. The Pimax Portal is a device that is not originally intended to be a retro gaming device, but more of a tablet that you can also use for virtual reality applications. However, this device has become quite popular in the retro handheld community because of its 144 refresh rate screen, making gameplay for Android as well as retro games surprisingly smooth. This is also one of the first Android handhelds to feature detachable magnetic controllers and has functionality very similar to that of the Nintendo Switch. So we're going to do an in-depth review in this video. We're going to find out what exactly this device can do and whether this is worth the price of entry or not. This is going to be a bit of a long video here, so let's strap in and let's get to work. Alright, let's go ahead and start things off with an unboxing. Full disclosure, I purchased this unit from Amazon with my own money. All my opinions are 100% my own. So this is typically what you're going to get from Amazon. If you purchase this, you're going to get a box in a box. So let's go ahead and open this thing up. Inside, you're going to find the unit itself, very nicely packaged and wrapped. Let's go ahead and take the Pimax Portal out of here, and we're going to set this aside for right now just to see what else we get in the box. So let's remove this protective layer, and you're going to get some silica gel. Make sure you don't eat this. I hear it's very toxic. And in addition to the toxic gel that says do not eat, you get your typical literature that comes with a unit like this. So you're going to get a getting started card, and you're probably wondering why there's 3 serial numbers here. It's a serial number for the unit itself as well as the 2 controller attachments. And this is all typical literature. We have a Pimax certificate here with a getting started QR code. And then we also have a little thank you card with some customer service emails, addresses, and numbers. And then here in this box, we have the USB-A to USB-C cable meant for charging as well as computer connection. And that's pretty much everything you get in the box here. Now let's go ahead and open up the unit. So we'll take this protective plastic off, and we are greeted with a very glossy screen. Take a good look because this is the cleanest that you are going to see this for the rest of the video. And the screen is super reflective. You could see my face, my forehead, my key light, my camera. Basically anything this thing is pointed at, you're going to see it. When you remove the controllers for the first time, you're going to have this piece of paper that basically warns you not to pinch yourself when reattaching the magnets to the device. I did it on purpose and it didn't hurt that bad. I would still be careful. Team Retro does not condone or endorse pinching yourself with the Pimax Portal in any way. So let's hop on our mount and ride on into Spec Town. So what we're rocking here with the Pimax Portal is a Qualcomm Snapdragon XR2 with a Qualcomm Adreno 650 GPU. We have 8 gigabytes of RAM on board, and depending on the Pimax Portal model you choose, you either get 128 or 256 gigabytes of storage. I bought the 256 model. However, you do have external micro SD card support. This particular model has a 5.5-inch LCD screen capable of outputting at 4K at 144 Hz refresh rate. However, for $100 more, you can opt for a QLED screen instead. The device has a 4000 mAh battery and also has cameras for external accessory or virtual reality support. We have Wi-Fi 6E, Bluetooth 5.1, and we are running a modified version of Android 10. Let's start with a tour of the device, and we'll start with the screen. We do have thin bezels around it, but I really don't like how reflective it is. It's probably the most reflective screen that I have. Either way, points off for having to look at my ugly mug. So let's move to the top of the device, and you can see the L and ZL buttons are very similar to a Switch Joy-Con. And if you push the trigger button all the way down, there is an audible, noticeable click. And the left bumper is audibly clicky as well. Moving across the top, you have your typical air vent, as well as an SD card slot, and again points off for making you have to use a SIM tool in order to access the SD card slot. And then on the right, you have the right shoulder buttons, which operate the same as the left shoulder buttons. And then you have this odd little divot here, and I'm not sure what those are specifically for. Let's take a look at the front of the device at the controls, and we're going to start with this split D-pad, and I do not like this. I don't like it on the Nintendo Switch, and I don't like it here. What I do like, however, is the fact that they decided to include physical Android buttons on the bottom. So there is a home, a back, and a multitasking button here, and this makes Android significantly easier to navigate. I wish more Android handhelds did this. You have Switch-style joysticks here at the top, and this particular model does not have light-up LEDs around the joysticks, but the QLED model does. On the right, you have a function button as well as start and select, and then you have your right joystick, and you have your face buttons here, and each controller has 2 additional hotkeys which are really useful when key mapping or setting hotkeys in RetroArch. Now moving on to the bottom of the device, you have 2 downward facing stereo speakers as well as a USB-C port. And you'll notice here there are no volume buttons on the device. Those are handled by the hotkeys in the front. And then finally on the back of the device, you have your 4 cameras for virtual reality. You have a camera and another vent on the back. And you'll also notice a notch at the bottom for docking. Now, some versatility that this device has that other Android handhelds don't is the ability to take the controllers off and use this as an actual tablet. And it's about as big as a standard cell phone, so you can play portrait mode games using the touchscreen and you won't have the controllers in the way. You could set them off to the side. This opens some other possibilities we'll take a look at later. Now let's get out our tools, and we'll start with Scaly, and this shows that the Pimax Portal comes in at about 368 grams, so it is extremely light. However, if we compare it to what I believe is the Pimax's biggest competitor, the AYN Odin, you're going to notice that comes in at about 378 grams, making it almost as light as the Pimax Portal, yet more comfortable due to its design. Now let's go ahead and grab Kali and let's check out the buttons as well as the joysticks. Buttons come in at about 7.7 milliliters and the joysticks come in at about 14.6 milliliters. And if we measure the overall thickness of the device, it's going to come in at about 15.9 millimeters. Now let's compare that to the Odin. Now my Odin has some modifications, specifically Hall sensor joysticks and buttons from Sakura Retro Mod, but the joysticks come in at about 15.3 millimeters and the buttons come in at about 7 millimeters, whereas the thickness of the device itself is about 15.7 millimeters. Now let's go ahead and compare the two screens. Now these are both at 50% brightness, as you could see on the footage here. And let's boot up a game so that we can compare how it looks on both of these screens. And if we're going to look at just brightness and color balance, you're going to notice that the Odin definitely seems to have a brighter screen, but the Pimax handles colorization much better. I feel like the colors are definitely more balanced on the Pimax, and the picture is a lot smoother. However, the Odin's display is definitely brighter. And as far as retro gaming goes, both displays will handle that job really well. Now, initial setup is very similar to every other Android device. You're going to have to pick your language, log into your Wi-Fi network, all those things that we're used to with initial setups. But there are a couple of differences here. One being that you are going to have to choose between VR mode and console mode. Because we don't have VR, we're going to go ahead and do console mode. And the other being that you're also going to have to create a Pimax account. And there doesn't seem to be a way around this. There's no skip feature, so you have to do it. And another thing I noticed when I went to go through the tutorial was that my right joystick was not paired and was not registering. And so I had to navigate the tutorial with the touch screen, and when I finally got to the home screen, I had to go into the Pimax's settings, and under the devices tab, I had to manually update the controller's firmware. And once I did that, the two controllers paired and didn't seem to give me any further trouble. But then I also recommend you go into the About section and under Software Version, go ahead and click that and update the Android OS as well. And then when it restarts, go back into Settings, About, and do it again. And then when it restarts, go into Settings, About, and do it again. And keep doing it and keep updating and keep restarting until it finally says the latest version. This was a big pain in the neck. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and take a look at the video modes. In stock, you only have 1080p at 60 and 1080p at 90. So if you want to activate 4K, you're going to have to enable lab features in the laboratory function, and you're also going to want to turn on multiple resolutions. And then you can go ahead and click 1080p at 120, 4K at 90, and 4K at 120. Now, unfortunately, every time you change resolutions, the entire device is going to restart. So you're more than likely going to want to settle on a resolution based on your use case so you don't have to keep restarting the device over and over again. And now, after all that, we are finally in a position where we can open up the Google Play Store, sign into our account, and start downloading apps. And if you are new to emulation setup on Android devices, I do have a video guide. I will link that in the video description below. With the only caveat being that on the Pimax portal, you cannot set a front end to be your default home app. If you try, it's just going to boot you back to the home screen. And this is a function that is just currently not available in the unit. So you could still have a front end, you just have to manually go into it in order to launch your retro games. Now let's go back to setting the picture quality to 4K at 120 Hz, and I don't really see the utility to actually doing this unless you plan on watching a movie in 4K on this tablet, because as you could see, Avengers Endgame here looks absolutely smooth and gorgeous. But then when you get into actual retro gaming, you're going to find 4K at 120 Hz is really not that much different from 1080p at 90 Hz, and that's because there's only so much that the naked eye could see, especially when it comes to running these old games. So the sweet spot for emulation is more than likely going to be 1080p at 90 Hz, and that's where I did the majority of my game testing to avoid any unnecessary battery drain. And so we already know that the lower end systems are going to work just fine, so let's jump into some higher end stuff with PSP using PPSSPP, and this is Ys 1 and 2 Chronicles. This game is a remake of an old NES game featuring the adventures of Adol Christian, and all of the Ys games actually feature this protagonist at different points of his life on different adventures. And so if you've never heard of the Ys series before and you are interested in getting into it, this may be a good starting point. And this game is programmed to run at a max of 30 frames per second, but you can see that we are maintaining that no problem. Another game I like to use for testing PSP emulation is Mega Man Powered Up. It's a lighter game, fairly easy to emulate, but you could see here that we are running it at a 3x resolution and everything looks good. Mega Man Powered Up is a full-on remake of the original NES version of Mega Man, and it looks beautiful on the PSP and on the Pimax Portal. Here's the obligatory Paper Mario Thousand Year Door test, because emulating this game has always been a thorn in my side when it comes to Android-based handhelds, but with this device we are able to use the regular Dolphin emulator. We don't need any MMJRs here. And so we're able to pass all of the tests that I like to run when testing GameCube emulation. Meaning if I can get to this point in Paper Mario Thousand Year Door, then chances are I'm going to have a decent experience. However, once I got past the first battle, I did notice the frame rate start to dip to below 60 frames per second, and things did start to stutter a little bit. But I feel that this can be alleviated by using a PAL ROM, which runs at 50 frames per second. Now with DS emulation, I saw a very rare opportunity to play in portrait mode. However, I could not map the directional buttons to the right joystick, and so that only left me with the option to use the touchscreen for the joystick and use the buttons for everything else, and that turned out to be a less than stellar experience. I couldn't get the key mapper to work right as well. However, if you do play DS games in landscape mode, you will still have a good experience. You just won't have the ability to play in portrait mode. So not a deal breaker, but definitely a missed opportunity. Moving on to Android gaming, there was one game that I struggled with playing at a 90 Hz refresh rate, and that was Pinball Arcade. It made the pinball machines move a little bit too fast, and so it was hard for me to react, and I'm already bad at pinball games, so this just made it even harder. So I had to dumb things down to a 60 Hz refresh rate, and then Pinball Arcade was just fine. Everything moved at the speed that it should have. The odd thing is this is the only game that actually gave me trouble with the refresh rate. I did not have a problem playing any of the machines I have on Zen Pinball. In fact, this was probably the best experience I've had playing Zen Pinball on an Android device to date. And if you don't play pinball games on your Android based handhelds, I strongly recommend that you look into at least one or two of them because this is a great way to actually utilize a retro handheld device is to play pinball games. And there's a lot of classics out there in the various collections. The only bummer is that you can go down a rabbit hole with in-app purchases. I'm sure many of you want to see Genshin Impact running on this machine, and it does run very well. I have the graphics bumped up to high and the refresh rate bumped up to 60 in app and 90 in Pimax settings. And the game settings do say that I'm quote unquote overclocking, but I didn't see any frame rate dips in my testing. And in fact, I was able to use the keymapper to use some of the Pimax Portal's hotkeys to actually get a pretty functional controller experience. So if you're interested in playing Genshin on the Pimax Portal, I'll let this play for a little bit so that you can see my keymapper settings and you could see how the game plays. And of course, there's no better demonstration of an Android device's screen than by playing Horizon Chase. So again, I'll let this play and I'll let you make your own judgments. Now, earlier in the video, I talked about the versatility of being able to take the controllers off and simply use this as a touchscreen device. And you can definitely do this with touchscreen only games, given that this device is about the size of a smartphone. So if Angry Birds is your thing, you can absolutely play Angry Birds on the Pimax Portal and take advantage of that 90 Hz refresh rate that we're getting out of this 1080p setting. But you can also play portrait mode games such as Super Mario Run. But then also keep in mind that this device has a built-in keymapper, and Super Mario Run is a game that you really only need to press one button to play. And so let's take this one step further. Let's actually go ahead and reattach one of the controllers, and let's map Mario's jump to the A button, which we could do just by putting the keymapper for the A button anywhere on the screen. And just like that, we are now playing Super Mario Run with a controller. But you know what? Let's not stop there. Let's go back to RetroArch, and with a little bit of tweaking, we can actually run an old arcade game in TATE mode. Now this involves rotating the screen 90 degrees in RetroArch, as well as changing the controller mapping so that up, down, left, and right are appropriately mapped to the right joystick, and then you map the face buttons accordingly, and we still have access to start and select on the left side of the right controller. And this concept can be applied to other Android devices too, so look for a tutorial video in the future. Let's start to wrap things up with my final thoughts on the Pimax Portal. And let's talk about the things that work first. This thing is powerful and versatile. You can use this device for a lot of different things. You can use it for retro gaming, you can use it for Android gaming, you can use it with or without the controllers, and then you also have extra hotkeys and physical buttons, which make navigating around this device a lot easier than any other Android device I own. And the versatility and potential of this device will only increase in the future when we do get some additional accessories that Pimax is planning on putting out, like a VR headset, as well as a bigger screen that you can plug this into. And the screen itself is pretty sharp. I've noticed that it's just been a pretty smooth experience all around. And even if I wasn't outputting anything in 4K, I was still getting a nice, crisp, clean picture. However, moving on to the things that need work, we're going to continue to talk about the screen because the more you use that touchscreen, the bigger of a filthy fingerprint magnet it's going to become. It is a very reflective, and every single touch that you make on this device until you wipe it down is very apparent. And so that ends up taking this attractive screen and making it look a lot less attractive. It's almost like going on a date with somebody who's very attractive and then finding out that they are actually a very sloppy eater. And suddenly the mess and the eating noises take away a lot of that attraction. That's how I kind of feel about the Pimax Portal screen. Let's add the price to that, as well as the fact that a lot of the accessories that were planned for this device are not out yet, and this device needs a lot of extensive setup. As you saw in this video, it was a pain in the neck. Ergonomically, it feels like a Switch Lite, but that's not necessarily a good thing because a Switch Lite without a grip is very uncomfortable for long play sessions. And you also have to factor in the need that 4K at the moment is wasted on this handheld because there really is not a practical use for it yet. It just provides extra drain on the battery. And so at the $500 entry point for the LCD model, even if there are currently coupons on Amazon that bring that down $50, this is a very hard recommend for me. Mostly because there are Android devices that can do what this device does at a much lower price point. Now that said, there are a lot of positives to having a device like this with a good screen and detachable controllers, so if everything I've talked about in this video appeals to you, then purchasing this device may be worth it. But depending on your use case, the decision on whether this device works or not is entirely up to you. But let me know what you think about this device in the comments below, and feel free to continue the conversation in the Retro Handhelds and the Steam Machine Discord channels. It's where you can find me in between videos, and I'm happy to have any questions or conversations that you may want to have. Just find the Team Retro channel in those respective communities and hit me up. But that'll do it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and if this was helpful to you in any way, please be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, bye for now, and don't stop believing.